The Pope and Young Club wants to welcome you as we rally together to ensure our bow hunting opportunities for today and tomorrow. You've come to the podcast that believes in preserving, protecting, and promoting the passion for bow hunting. Join us as we strive to be the voice of today's bow hunter. This is the Pope and Young Podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Pope and Young Podcast. Jason Roundsville here, joined as always by my co-host Dylan Ray. And we have with us, straight from Puerto Rico, we have Ishi Award winner, world record typical mule deer holder, Bowdy Gardner with us. Bowdy, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here, guys. Thanks for having me.
Hey, congratulations. We just finished wrapping up convention not long ago. Yeah, just want to throw a huge congratulations out there to you for that just magnificent mule deer.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I was really wanting to be there. Fortunately and unfortunately, it was my anniversary. So it was year 18. And my wife had let me go on enough hunts, but this one here, I wasn't going to dare even ask. So, but wish I could meet you guys in person, but good to be with you guys.
Well, you know, Arizona's coming up in 2 years. And from what I understand, you have some other pretty good bucks that would probably get a panel invite. So maybe in Arizona.
Maybe we load them up and bring them down.
That's right. So it's we're talking just a bit ago before we started recording, but for anybody who's listening that doesn't understand, well, number one, it was a mule deer in velvet, typical of 218 and 2/8. So for anybody that follows social media or Facebook, that would be, Dylan, we did the math on that. That was what, a 296-inch Facebook deer, I think is how that translates over. So, and for everybody on Facebook who's shot a 200-inch typical mule deer, yeah, you probably haven't. So anyway, we see that all the time. It's like, oh, I got a 200-inch buck. And you're like, no, that's a 150, but still a nice buck, but it's not 200 inches. This one is it is absolutely everything you would expect in a buck of that magnitude. And I've actually got to see it twice now, once in Utah for that special panel measurement last year, and then again at convention. And man, what a tremendous trophy. So tell us a little bit about that buck. I mean, people want to hear about it.
I believe it was 2012. And I really was just starting to get into bow hunting. I grew up, my dad, my uncle would always be out on the opener of the archery hunt and with the recurve bows, or, you know, the first early stage of like the compound bow. And I don't know if they ever killed anything, but we always had a great weekend out hunting the opener. And so there was like a point in my life where things were starting to slow down a little bit. And I'm like, why not start to bow hunt? And I think the reality was everybody wanted to hunt Southern Utah. And I had a buddy that couldn't hunt a muzzleloader Ponsegont tag. It called me up kind of last minute. It's like, hey, here's a tag. He had bought the tag, and it was a very thoughtful guy. It's like, hey, if you want to go cover the outfitter, here's a tag. I'm like, what? I'm like, absolutely. And so I hunted with a guy, and I was it just kind of reignited like the passion for it. And I was like, man, what I really want to do is start bow hunting. And so ended up getting a tag in 2012. It's a Ponsegont tag, and the outfitter that I wanted to hunt with, I called him up, and he's like, man, we have no availability. And I'd knock doors for a living. And the first time somebody tells you no, it's like, okay, you got to go at them multiple times. And so I'm like, hey, I'm not going to take no for an answer. And what I did know is that Vrosco was his biggest competitor at the time. They're really good buddies. And I just said, hey, you know, don't make me go with Dave, because, you know, if I go with Dave, I'll never come back. And I kind of poked him a little bit. I'm like, hey, you're hunting all these old timers that really can't get out and hunt with the bow. Like, let's get out and hunt. And he laughed. And so he'd reached out and said, hey, if you can drive down to Richfield tonight, we'll consider it. And so I got in my truck that night, drove a couple hours down to Richfield, had a great meeting. I was like, hey, I'll hunt wherever, doesn't matter. And so that was kind of the beginning of me hunting with one of my best friends now, Jeremy Chamberlain. And I remember a couple of years earlier, his son, Connor Chamberlain's on a LDS mission right now in South Africa, or in Cape Town. He's not in Cape Town. He's in Ghana, Cape Coast mission. He was probably at the time, so 10 years ago, 20, he was like 10 years old. He'd been like, just one of your, I have a 12-year-old, but imagine your 10-year-old out looking through a spot and scopes, hey, Dad, I found a buck. Just randomly looks at this buck, and there was a giant deer, which was Cato at the time, 2 or 3 years earlier. And that was really the only time they'd ever seen him, but they figured the deer was over 200 inches as a typical then. And the year I killed him, I believe he was eight years old. And so 200 inches as a 5-year-old. Well, this particular year, he just blown up. It was, perfect winter, great spring, great water. And so they had a couple trail cam pictures of him. Nobody had ever seen him in person other than like 3 years earlier. And I remember Jeremy's like, hey, we got this Cabela's cameraman that wants to come out with you. And I'm like, is he quiet? He's like, yeah. He's like, he just got done hunting the strip. And I'm like, why not? Right. And so I remember them putting me in this blind. Never really spent any time in the blind. They put me in this blind in southern Utah, and I think it was like 110 degrees that day. And that was the start of like me really getting into bow hunting for the next, I think the next 8 or 9 days. Me and this, I don't remember his name, we're sitting in this blind, and it was just sweating. It felt like just a big sweat fest. And I remember one evening, Cato walked in. It was like probably 6:30, and I reach over and grab the cameraman's leg, and he looks up, and the buck is like right there. And I'm like getting ready to pull back, and the cameraman turns the camera on, and just the noise of this.
Oh, geez.
Buck was gone. And I thought I was going to kill the guy. Literally thought I was going to kill him. Nobody ever seen him. Nobody seen him in daylight. He was a ghost.
Oh, man.
And once they put up the blind, they had never had him come back in again. And I was just sick. So we get out of the blind. I'm fired up. We go back to lodge that night. I'm like, hey, we got to get rid of this guy. And I said a couple more days, nothing. And this is how smart this buck was. I could see his tracks coming in. And he was just circling the blind. He'd come in the wind, circle, and go off the bed. So I said, hey, look, I'm done with this blind. We were in the cedars, but I'm like, hey, I'm going to put up I said, I just need a tree stand. I'll cut out the middle section of the cedar tree, and I'll just shoot him 70 yards off the road as he's coming up off this 2-track, as he's coming up off this. He was traveling about 3 miles to bed, all in the dark.
Wow.
And we were about, we're within what we figured probably 500 to 700 yards of where he was bedding. And so I just said, look, I'll shoot him off. He was coming up this rim off this 2-track. I'm like, I'll just shoot him off the 2-track, because we could see his tracks every morning, or you could see where they're kind of pounding this trail. And so I took some clippers, cut out the whole section of this cedar tree, and 7:30, it was always 7:30 in the morning if it was going to happen or not happen. And like 7:32, I'm sitting on the top of this cedar tree. Imagine me, I'm almost 6'2", and it's not like I'm like blending in like a 15-foot cedar tree, right? And all of a sudden I look back to my right, and there's 9 bucks coming in, making their way to their bed. And as a big buck, he's the last of 9 bucks. Bunch of little dinks in front of him. And then this other buck we called Hamage, which was his running mate, like a 193-year-old giant deer. And it was really sad. The deer got hit by a car the next year. As a 4-year-old, it would have been another giant. And there was a cedar tree off to my left. I figured about 42 yards, he'd probably make a hard right, and that's where I'd draw back. And little bucks fed in. 2 big bucks are standing there looking. Hamage comes in, Cato standing there by himself. And it was just amazing to watch the caliber of this deer, not just from as impressive as how he looked physically, but just intellectually how smart this deer was. Set back, and just like I thought, he made a hard right. And as soon as he went right behind the cedar tree, I pulled back. Well, I pulled 90 pounds, and 90 pounds full draw, this deer just sat there. And I'm waiting. And, with 8 other bucks looking around, something caught a glimpse of me as I pulled back. So they all took off. This buck just didn't move. He stood there right in line in the cedar tree with me. I couldn't shoot. And I'm probably a minute and a half into the draw, starting to shake. And he finally gets nervous and he pounces out to some big old buckbrush. And the buckbrush, because of the angle that I had, where he was at, it was probably like 8 or 9 foot buckbrush, giant buckbrush. But from my angle, I could see down on him. And he's standing there. And right before I shoot, because I now don't have my yardage, I don't have a chance to shoot a yardage. I'd figured it was, I thought it was, 48 to 50 yards. Well, the timeout right there, the only reason I flung an arrow, and I regret flinging an arrow, is that morning or the previous night as I went back to the lodge, we'd had 2 other deer show up that we'd been after. And this is crazy. We called one Joe Dirt, one called Bruce Almighty. Well, Joe Dirt was 230s and Bruce Almighty was 40 inches wide and also 230 buck running together.
Wow.
And, they thought Cato at the time was like a 205 type typical. And I remember the first time I'd come in, I said, hey, the deer's over 210, probably over 215. They started laughing at me. It's like, they don't make deer that big. And,
right. And they don't.
And I was like, well, I said, I've killed the deer in Colorado that had 30-inch beams. It was like 218. I said, the deer has 30-inch beams. And they laughed, like, well, we gave him 27. So I was like, give me your measurements. Like 27. And I just said, he's bigger than all that. I was like, well, like, he's the world record then. I said, he's the world record then. And so with that, but then I'm not really understanding how big a typical is, because you always go to like, big typical than non-typical, and all the trash, your eyes are always going to go to non-typical. And so in the back of mind, I'm like, hey, if I fling an arrow here, what's the loss? I can go hunt these big deer tonight, because it was an evening hunt where they were feeding in. You couldn't really hunt them in the morning. And so I guess I think it was like 48 yards, hung on him, flung the arrow, flight of the arrow looked great. And deer takes off. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I shot underneath him. And so I lean back, radio my buddy, and just like, hey man, I just missed him. He's like, what do you mean you missed him? Like, he came in, this is what happened. And he's like, well, set tight. I'm like, no, I missed him. He's like, can you see the deer? I'm like, yes, I can see the deer. He's like, what he's doing? He's like, he's wagging his tail. He's like, he's not, you didn't miss him. You hit him. It's like, you shot him in the guts. And deer wags his tail. I mean, this is early on, and hunting like that with the bow. He's like, you shot him in the guts. He's sick. I said, don't move. So I sat there another hour until he walked out about 400 yards out of this big cedar bowl up into the cedar trees. And so my buddy comes in, he's like, get back up in the tree stand. I'm like, no, I know where my arrow's at. No, get up in the tree stand. I'm like, no, I know where my arrow's at. So we walk over there, arrow's completely covered in blood. And my buddy was always laughing. He's like, hey, just put an arrow in him, I'll find him, because we're in the desert. We'll track him down. And so I'm like, okay. I'm like, really, the Uishi award should equally as much go to my buddy Jeremy. The guy's one of the most incredible hunters I've ever been around, one of the most incredible humans you'll ever meet in your life. And he's like, dude, this deer is dead. And he's like, so we'll go back. The responsible thing is to go back and not push the deer. And so we drove back. It was like the longest 7 hours of my life. I had a buddy that had called me that was planning on coming down and hunting with me the remainder of the hunt. And I said, hey, look, my buddy Kent K will be down here in a few hours. We'll just wait until he gets back. It's like, perfect. So we wait. Kent was a little late. So we get like 3:00. Finally rolls around. Kent rolls in. As we're driving back down to, we're just outside of Kanab. As we're driving back down that way, a big old black storm cloud rolls through. And you got to realize it doesn't rain in the desert. And I'm like, I'm like, are you kidding me? And it's not like, it's like, this is like sand pods, right? Like this buck is straight desert. Like he just didn't come out of his winter range. And so where a lot of these deer were winter, he was a year-round buck, a resident buck. And just as we got to where I shot, it was a torrential downpour, like this rain and cats and dogs for about 10 minutes. So we get to where he was at, picked up the arrow again, could kind of figure out where the tracks were at, because I also saw where the direction of where he last went in the trees. So we got to there and there's a big old pool of blood about the size of like a watermelon. My buddy's like, dude, he's dead. He's going to be here within 100 yards. His first bed, he's going to be laying down, not got back up, because mine, it's been like 7 hours, right? Well, we go a couple 100 yards, no blood, just a track, no nothing. And we get within about 300 or 400 yards in the trees, and like I'm colorblind, so me following blood is like impossible. So for me as an archery hunter, I've always had to say, look, I've had to always make it count every single time. And unfortunately, I'm like, look, I made a mistake. I shot an arrow I probably shouldn't have shot. My yardage was wrong. Actually, it was 56 yards and I shot 46. So that's why I shot low. I didn't know this at the time, but so we're sitting there. I'm looking at tracks. I'm like, hey, you went right. My buddy's like, no, he went left. Jeremy's on his hands and knees. He's like, no, and he picks up this little stick, literally like the leaf of like dead grass. Like there's blood on this. I'm like, dude, that is mud. He's like, that's blood. I'm like, that's mud. And I'm like, look at that ant. There must be blood on the back of that ant too. And I was messing with him. He's like, no, the buck went left, but all the tracks went right. And sure enough, we go left, come out of this little teeny ravine, right to the edge of some cedar trees, about 1.5 miles in at this point. Sun setting. We're probably 20 minutes before sunset. So it's getting dark. We've been tracking him now for a couple hours. And we get right to the hard pan. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're going to have no more track at this point. Ground goes completely hard. And well, Jeremy's about 5'8". My buddy Kent's probably 5'6". And the way these cedar trees are, I'm gonna have to like duck down to see anything. And we're like, dude, this buck's gone. He laid down right at the edge of these trees, and you could see he'd rolled around on the hard dirt, but he was gone. And Jeremy's like, dude, this is not good. We must not hit him as good as we thought. And all of a sudden, about that time, Kent's like, there he is. And where we look back towards the I get my directions mixed up, from Puerto Rico to Utah. So we look back to the east, and this is how smart the buck was, is he knew he was wounded. So he's looking back on his tracks. Wind is coming up in his, coming off his back. So he's looking back in his track as the wind's coming off. So he's protected. And we just see this, the biggest thing I've ever seen in my life. And I can't shoot him. He's probably 90 yards, just doing this head bob. So you can tell he's just really, really sick on his last limb. And so we take our boots off. We leave Kent there. Kent's got his video camera. So he's videoing. We actually have film footage of this. If you haven't seen, I need to send it to you. And so Kent's filming, and Jeremy and I sneak up and around, and I shoot him in his bed, and at like 44 yards. And just as I was getting ready to shoot, because the deer is literally on his last breath, Jeremy takes off running and catches this buck in his arms as he dies. And the buck dies in his arms because he didn't want his velvet, right? And he's got pristine, as you saw, he has.
Oh my gosh! Now that is a body right there.
He has pristine velvet, and Jeremy's also a taxidermist, right? And he just didn't want him to do that last bit kick and thrash his horns. So he literally died in his arms, hands caught. And you always laugh at these Toyota, like the Toyota kicks, where they jump up and kick.
Right.
And as soon as Jeremy had seen with his own eyes, he's just like, this is the new world record. And he saw it. He's like, this deer is so much bigger than we thought. And it was funny. Jeremy had off the hoof. It's like, this deer is, 226, I think what he officially grossed, netted 218 and some change. So, but yeah, really, really cool experience to share with a couple buddies, which is also kind of makes it all worth the while as well.
Yeah. Well, after a track job like that, I hopefully he earned his steak dinner.
Hamburger, hot dogs.
Hamburger. Hey, there's nothing wrong with a burger. That is great. It's as you tell the story, I'm trying to think, you just look in your own mind at like blood trails you followed and opportunities you've had. And I can't imagine having to do that and not being able to see the blood, like not being able to see that color. So that's how did a guy that can't follow a blood trail, how did he become a bow hunter? Bowdy, how'd you get into bow? I mean, it was just that's what the family did.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just that I just realized if you want to hunt big mule deer,
right?
Big mule deer and hunt them like the natives did. I grew up on the outskirts of a reservation. And I always said that I was born in the wrong era. If I could go back, I'd be a native, and that's how I'd live, and that's how I'd like spend my time. I just feel like it's spiritual. I don't know how to put another word to it. Like the closest I feel to God is in the woods. Some of the greatest memories that I have are with my friends. Looking forward to be able to share that with my own kids as well. Both my grandpas have passed away, and the Wyoming's another story, but I had a really, really cool experience this year hunting backcountry Wyoming, and complete dumb luck, but it was those memories that I'd shared with my grandpas in the backwoods of those things. And I think bow hunting, if you really want the best chance to kill a giant mule deer, is all the work you do pre scouting. You have that window where they're, not that they're dumb, they haven't been pushed around yet. They're more patternable at that time. So if you can find one, you have the greatest chance of killing it. And I think I realized that as I kind of did my homework. He said, hey, look, props to Roscoe's like, hey, look, if you want to kill a big deer, my advice is you to hunt it with a bow, because down here, we can pattern them, you can hunt them, if you're athletic and you can spend the time shooting them. And so I think it was that poor shot. It was actually a great shot. It was just poor. Didn't have a chance to range, right? I hit the buck half an inch underneath his heart. So, but that experience there really made me committed to the process, where I don't think we've ever had to go further than, 20 yards ever recover another buck. I think we've killed, 12 or 13 deer over 200 inches. And 11 of them with a bow, 10 or 11 with a bow. But that was a really important teaching principle to me, because one, I don't want animals to suffer, and two is like, every shot matters, and the game of just patience, So yeah, being colorblind, you really have to make up. They say like a guy that's blind, right, has really good hearing. And I think
there you go.
Being colorblind, it's like, look, I can't, like, I gotta have, I hunted a big bull and beaver a couple of years ago, and the only shot I had, he was on the walk, and my buddy was with me, had an earpiece in. I was trying to get a range out of him, and don't ever try to shoot a bull on the walk. And I shot the bull a little far back, and we killed him. But it was a week later that we found the bull, and I just wouldn't give up because I knew the bull was dead. Unfortunately, it was the smell that we finally found him, but it was a big old bull. But yeah, like the practice of bow hunting, right? I just, you guys that shoot bows, it's just such a different experience. You just feel like you're one with the animal in nature. The whole experience is just a lot more special.
Now, yeah, I think most of our members, most of our bow hunters would definitely agree with that. And so we're sitting here talking, and this is have the current and newly, well, I guess it was appointed about a year ago, but went to convention, was on display, great opportunity for people to come see this tremendous trophy. And just to give a little background about the Ishii Award, this is quite literally the highest honor bestowed upon a bow hunter in North America. It's at the most can be given out every convention, so every 2 years, and many conventions it's not given out. I've seen some tremendous trophies, even new world records that they did not feel was Ishii caliber worthy. So, I mean, a huge congratulations on that. That's just I think for those of you who haven't heard about it, do a little research. We got some information online and on our website and whatnot. It's really something to behold, and it was neat to me to see how special that not only the panel measures that are making recommendations to the board, but the entire board of directors takes extra special care with that before it's even considered, and then especially before it's presented. So congratulations on that. That's a pretty exciting opportunity.
I mean, I don't know. Thank you. Honored, humbled, like, I just hope that like our kids have the ability and our grandkids have the ability to hunt the wildlife that we have a chance to hunt and harvest, right? And that stuff's there. But yeah, like I had a chance, and it's unfortunate, like Jeremy kind of mentioned it in passing, and as he drove to Reno, I kind of looked it up and I'm like, wow, wish I could have met Ishi. Sounds like my type of guy.
Oh man. Yeah.
And Dr. Pope and Dr. Young as well. So
yeah, that's Art Young, I think, was the original. I think he made the first ever hunting video. That's what was 101 years ago. I think last year was the 100th anniversary of that video.
Do we still have that? Do we have that video still?
We do. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I'd love to see that.
Yeah. It's, yeah,
he wasn't with the cameraman. He wasn't with the cameraman from Cabela's. I'll tell you that.
No, but I mean, he literally shot a moose, made a raft out of the moose, and I think what I heard was it's 200 miles floated out 200 miles on a raft made of a moose skin that he just shot.
No, he did not.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. So, and that was before GPS and all the modern conveniences we have now. So,
it's really interesting, not to cut you off. I've always, my buddies have always asked, like, one of the questions, how do you become a better hunter? And I always tell them bow hunt, because the margin error that you have, like, you might not get another chance. There was a bull that I hunted on the boulders for, I think, 3 years, never killed the bull, ever killed the bull.
Right.
And I really thought the year that I killed Cato, I had a chance at the bull would have been the new state record typical for sure. He was a giant typical, but I hunted the thing for 3 years. And I remember one year, this is kind of crazy. It maybe a little extreme. I had a chance to kill him. And because I was out of shape, and I generally I'm in really good shape, but the boulder top is, the top of the mountain's like it's like 10,600 feet or something. And these elk will migrate off the top to the meadows and work their way back up. And I just wasn't in shape. I couldn't keep up. I call it running with the bulls. And so that one year, I remember running stairs and running ladders and running hills for like 120 days, where I could just run for like 100 days plus, or 100 for like about 70 minutes straight. I could just run uphill. And because the chance I had, I wasn't in shape for it. And so, but that's bow hunting. A gun, you don't need to do those things. Bow hunting, you have to be in position. And the sad thing is I'd killed Cato. My wife made me promise. She's like, hey, you have to promise you'll be on this Lake Powell trip. I'm like, okay. And I look at the calendar dates and the camera footage that we had of this bull. He usually rubbed. It was like the 27th through like the 3rd. He was in the wallows of August to September. And I'm like, okay, this trip will be perfect. It'll work. It's a little early. Well, the days I was in Lake Powell, he was in my wallow, feet in the air, for 2 days. Never saw him again in my life.
That's how it goes. That is exactly. That's the nice thing. That's the magic, and also the curse of the trail camera. Because now you're like, where he was, and you should have been there because you were planning to be there, then you just couldn't make it. I've had that happen to me. Not on a bull like that, but just on quality animals. Now, speaking of that, I know you've got some other like monster mule deer. So tell folks about some of these other big mule deer that you've been into.
Tell about the Eclipse bull or the Eclipse buck.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think it was 2017 or 18. It was September or August 21st.
I can look.
Yeah, they're actually a really funny story. Dave Roscoe killed a giant buck that year. And I called up Dave, and I'm like, hey, there's a chance I might not be able to hunt this tag. Can I come hunt with you? And he's like, yeah, maybe. But what Dave didn't tell me at the time, he had enough points to draw the Ponsagon as well. And so he's like, yeah. If I have a big deer, you can hunt. So I bought a Ponsagon tag, and Dave was really, really quiet all summer long. And I remember it was like 1st of August. I call him up. I'm like, hey, Dave, I need to either get rid of this tag or I'm going to come hunt. And Dave is like, hey, no, you want to go hunt with Jeremy again? I'm like, well, of course I want to hunt with Jeremy. He was going to hunt with me anyways. And he's like, no. I ran into Wade. They got a big deer. I'm like, well, I haven't heard anything. I know you have a big deer. And he gets really quiet. And I'm like, hey, Dave, I love you. You're a brother. Just show me a picture of your buck because you promised me you'd show me your biggest deer. So Vrosco sends over, this is how good a dude Dave is. He sends over a picture of a buck, and I'll have to go back and find it. I'm like, dude, Dave, I think he called him moose. The deer looked like a moose. I think the deer was like almost 240 inches, so much mass, one of the coolest bucks I've ever seen in my life. And and Dave's like, hey man, it's your deer to come hunt. There's probably only 2 guys that could kill it, you or me, because we're dumb enough to set it out. And it's going to take somebody that's willing to set it out the whole time. And you're going to have to sit on water because the only chance to hunt him in the desert. And I just said, hey, Dave, I want you to go kill him. I'll go hunt whatever deer they have on this other place. And so Dave actually ends up killing this deer. I think he hunted him like 15, 16 days. Really cool story. And so David sent a picture, or he hadn't killed yet actually. And so I remember it was the eclipse. I'm with a couple of buddies. And, there's nothing better in archery hunt when you get like a rainstorm that comes in, because it's like it's like an added morning or night to your hunt, right? Deer will get up and feed early when they're in the velvet. And so I was hunting these ponderosas, really, really steep ravine, and buddy Jeremy comes over, is like, hey, rain, it just happens. Like buck just stood up. He's coming to you. And I have video. I can send you the video of this buck. And they'd been after this deer for 3 or 4 years. Once again, kind of a nocturnal buck, and buck actually just kind of made a mistake, walked in at like 42 yards. And I wish it was like more dramatic than that. And he was quarterback and snuck one in him, and he died like 20 yards off. But deer's they called him Casper, but we really should have called him like Harley Davidson, because he has matching flyers on both sides. It was on like a 208 frame, and I'm going like 242.
Wow. That's not on the day of the eclipse.
2017.
It was, was it where you were? Was it?
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just, I was right in line for that eclipse. And so where I was, it was completely pitch black for a little bit. And like you're talking about the animals, like I just remember being out in the yard looking at this thing. And I mean, everything just went still. The birds went silent. It's like it just was like a shock. Nothing knew what was going on. And so was it that where you were, was it like pitch black, or was it like most like dark, or how was it where you were?
It wasn't like pitch black. But it was like, for sure, like it would appear like it was like almost dark.
Okay.
And
wow.
then it just like, it was weird. And like it rained and like stopped. And what was crazy is like, so I killed a big deer that morning. My buddy killed a two teen buck that night. My other buddy killed a 220 buck the next morning. So that hunt, that morning was the best movement I'd ever seen, still today, with animals.
Interesting.
And I always laugh. We may never have killed him had it not been the eclipse.
Right.
So the next eclipse, when it comes through, hopefully it's during hunting season and you want to be in the hills, whatever time of the day it is.
Yeah, no kidding. That's good.
If it's obviously hunting hours, right?
Yeah. that was one of those things where I'd heard about it, and we just happened to be like directly like in there's like a line, and apparently like as you follow the sun across the sky, like we were like in the middle of the heart of the darkest area, and then as you go out, go north or south, then you get varying degrees of it, and it was something where I'd heard about it, and I'm just like, oh man, really? I just want to go do something. Like for me, I think I was trying to get a tuna trip in offshore, and so I stayed so we could do this eclipse thing, and it was quite a bit neater than I had expected it to be. I just hadn't expected much, and it was actually pretty cool, and it is. It's kind of like even here it was just the birds. You just noticed there was a complete difference during that, just for the few minutes that it was. So
Yeah, I think the cricket.
that's good. I don't know when the next.
I always know like when it's the start of like the evening movement was when the crickets like start chirping, right?
Yeah.
And I remember the crickets had started chirping again. That's what was like I thought was really interesting. So
yeah, that's cool. We'll have to keep that. Dylan, you'll have to remind me of that
I will.
when the next one
Bowdy
comes
said
through.
go hunt today, so go hunt.
Yeah.
You're
And see,
guaranteed to kill a 220.
there you go. They just come out of the woodworks at that point.
They just pop out.
They come out.
Yeah. Knowing my luck, next time it'll be in July. And then I'll be like, but Mr. Game Warden, Bodie's told me that I should be hunting on the eclipse day.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, that's great, but I'm going to put the cuffs on you because the season doesn't start for 3 more weeks.
Yeah, no bueno there.
So,
No,
it's crazy. I think the eclipse went across exactly dark across, like there was like 7 cities of Salem. I think it started like Salem, Oregon.
Yeah.
Then like,
oh, really?
Yeah. You follow that map. I think it hit like right dead center through like 7 cities of Salem.
Yeah. And I'm just outside of Salem.
There you go.
By Almsville, and Almsville was supposedly the heart of the whole. Anyway, I don't know, but it was really neat. Yeah. So next time I won't be sitting around my yard. I'm gonna be out in the woods.
At least getting a squirrel, at least a squirrel if it's in season.
Dylan, he was killing a giant buck. I was just out in my yard watching the birds. What were you doing during the eclipse?
I was sitting in my driveway with all my kids. I did have my spotter out, like looking at it. It was pretty cool. I got some cool pictures through a spotter.
Nice. So what is other than big mule deer and elk, what else do you like to chase?
Really cool. I don't know if you met Rye Johnson. He was a candidate for the Ishii Award, right? Small world. There's nobody better than Rye. Jeremy and I hunted with him in Arctic Red this past year. We were supposed to hunt the year of 2020, but COVID kind of put a stop on a lot of international hunts. And so we hunted with him this last year and hunted 15, 16 days with Rye, like exceptional hunter. He'd killed a giant ram with his bow in a place where he killed the ram this last year. But it's hard. They always tell you don't start with sheep because it gets in your blood. But I think what I love most about the sheep is just sleep on the ground, backpacking, right? It's just that you make a mistake, you go without it, for the entire hunt. It just, it just punishes you and you earn it in every aspect of the hunt. So, I've spent a little bit of time in British Columbia. I really had to earn my stone sheep. I hunted with Jerry Craig up there, Kinniskin Outfitters. Actually hunted with the natives up there and hunted with Jerry's brother, Chris. And man, that guy is one incredible human. I believe he was like, sorry, Chris, if you listen to this, but I think at the time I hunted with him, he was over 70. And that guy was as tough as I'd ever seen anybody in my life. No coat, snowstorm on. He forgot his coat, and we're building like a rock fort to try to hunker down on this thing. But I'd always tell people, I'm like, look, what I wish I'd have done is like just put aside $500 to $1,000 a year, because it's amazing. Like 20 years goes by or 30 years goes by, and you're in a position that you can go buy a hunt. And and go hunt. And I think a stone or a doll sheep is one of those. It's like everybody needs to go experience it once. So,
yeah, I talked to Jerry and he says, hey, I was at one of the shows, and because he's one of our outfitter partners, and I think he pulled up the first page of Stone Sheep, and he went through and he's like, yeah, this one's ours, this one's ours, this one's ours, this one's ours. That, well, all four of those are ours. Like, he went through and like a huge chunk of the front page of the record books for Stone Sheep are all Kanaskin and Jerry and his crew up there. So,
and they do it like they're hardcore. Like, there's no like pre-scouting, there's no flying. Like, it's pound you in a saddle. Like, you're in every little bit of that. But they've done it for, I think Jerry started because his dad died. Jerry's the youngest boy. And I think Jerry started when he was like 17, 18. So, I mean, imagine 40 years in the hills.
yeah.
I mean, it's wild. Like, it's rodeos every day. You got bears coming in on you. I mean, you never know what you're going to get, right? Like,
yeah.
That in itself, that experience is just something that, like, I would encourage everybody, if they can, to save a little and let that thing compound, but it's like, that was really, really, really fun. So hopefully prices tags come back down, because they've been ridiculous. I think I paid $14,000 to go hunt my first doll sheep, and it's ridiculous right now. So,
yeah. Have you ever hunted the Arctic, like muskox, polar bear, anything like that?
Have not. I had a buddy go to Greenland or Iceland this year to hunt muskox with a bow, and he's
Nice.
like, I don't know if my bow's going to work. It was like 40 below, and I'm like, it has to work.
Right. Yeah.
So he said it was really fun, but I have not.
Okay.
I have a buddy that dredges gold up in Nome, Alaska. He goes up and dredges, and I went up. I don't know, 10 years ago over the 4th of July. And we went out and was chasing musk ox with just on her feet. And I remember this musk ox turned around to come back after me. And I was like, oh, this is crazy. So,
yeah, we had Eric Bethune on a little bit ago, and he world record Thule elk. And he also had a polar bear and a musk ox at convention this year, and he was telling some stories, and he's like, man, that's just a whole nother world. He says you don't know if you're going to like it, and then once you do it, you just have to do it again. So it's kind of interesting to hear different perspectives from people. What is if you could pick anything to hunt in the world, like what would something be that you just love to go chase?
Mule deer.
That good answer.
It's people like, hey, don't you want to go hunt something else? And I'm like, no. First, second, third, fourth would be mule deer.
That's awesome.
If I could hunt a rutting bull, right, just like that, or be with somebody that's hunting a big bull, like that's great. But for me, it's just that they're the ghost. They're just so. I mean, I hunted Mexico. This is the first year I hadn't gone in I think maybe 12, 14 years. And I killed one 200-inch mule deer. He was a giant, but one. Like, they're just so hard, man. They really are just like they're such incredible, like, they don't make very many mistakes. If they make them right, it feels like every time it works out, it's luck. You're just like, man, it was lucky. The deer I hunted in Wyoming, man, I slept in the dirt, all of the bow hunt.
Wow.
And I had one, I really wanted to kill the bow, really, really, really wanted to kill the bow, because I think he could have been the new, pushing the new state record for Wyoming. And he was just, I'll send you a video afterwards, but just the thing he didn't make a mistake.
Yeah.
He was so disciplined, right? He was in bed when he needed to be in bed, came out late. I'm just trying to catch like where this corner piece he was coming out and feeding. And I had one morning, I had him at 42 yards. And stinking elk were rutting, and the elk blew him out. I needed him to come like 4 yards to me, 4 yards
Oh,
up.
man.
I just wouldn't shoot him. I wouldn't, after Kate, I was like, there's no way I can shoot a deer like this in the top of the back.
Right.
And the grass was so tall. I mean, because it rained so much up there in the high country of Wyoming. The grass was, I mean, literally up to the top of his back. And so he's just off the backside of this little hill. I just needed him to feet up this little top.
Right.
And that sucker just, I mean, they're just that sixth sense they have, as you hunt big deer, they've got that sixth sense and couldn't get it done. And
that's how they get big.
Yeah. And to get him with a gun was like completely dumb luck. I was in the wrong place. A buddy of mine thought we had a buck. It was him, wasn't him. And I'm clear off the wrong side of the mountain on the wrong ridge. And this buck comes running through the trees, stops and looks back at me. And I'm like, I think this is this. We called him Zeus. I said, I think this is Zeus. But I'm like, it can't be Zeus because my buddy's got him. And I can't throw my binoculars up because it's foggy, could rain a ton, and put my gun up and shot the deer, not knowing what I shot. And it was him as he's looking back. He dropped off in the trees. So,
yeah. So now, no pressure or anything, but last year, Chuck Adams went out and got a world record Sitka blacktail, and then 3 days later broke his record again. Are you, do you have plans of bringing a bigger typical to Arizona next time?
Oh, just want to say, hey, if I can just see one and take a picture, that's good enough for me.
Yeah.
I'll take a picture of the next one. Hopefully that counts.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's well, I know you got some other ones. Love to see those we've got a big display we're going to be putting together in 2 years, and would love to see some of those down there. And we'll have to check with the dates, and maybe we won't be falling on your anniversary in Arizona. Although it's probably the same weekend.
No, I'll promise if it's not during my anniversary, we'll load them up and bring them down to you. So
okay. That sounds good.
There's a good collection of them. So,
yeah. So now what took you to Puerto Rico?
Oh, I'm a firm believer in top 10 goals. And I served an LDS mission in New Zealand, got shipped off the Cook Islands for a couple of years. And, the year of 2020, we came down really just to kind of see what we thought. And how COVID was.
Right.
It locked the whole world down. And so we kind of got stuck here. And, it's like Utah had, I think, 800 inches of snow this year, 75 feet. And when you don't do a winter a year, you're like, man, the best thing about that's, the falls and the springs. And I mean, we love to get out in the snow as much as anybody, but not have to live in it. And so that's kind of what happened is got here, and COVID changed a lot of the world, how business works and, and how you can do business and markets. And, it's not so important to actually have to be in a studio to do an interview, right? We can hop on and do it virtually wherever we're at in the world. And people appreciate that. And so for me, it was my kids were young at the time, and, I'm like, hey, let's see if it worked. And we didn't know if it was going to work. We had 200 earthquakes our first year down here.
Wow.
Every day we're like, hey, it's probably, we need to head back home. And, I always say, if you have a chance to kind of get outside of your comfort zones, you're going to meet a lot of incredible people and have a lot of new experiences. And so, we spent our first few months down here, went back to Utah, didn't know if we were going to come back, and decided we'd try it again. And now it's like, we don't know if we will head back eventually back to Utah permanently, but for the time being, we had young kids, and it's a good place to have them out in the sun and just being active, being kids,
Nice.
I was laughing. My kids had school this week, and the person that runs the school was talking about some of the things they try to implement in the school. And I'm laughing, well, that's just how my life was out on the farm. We're drinking out of the ditch, and and building forts and playing cowboys and Indians and shooting shooting arrows at each other with toilet paper wrapped on the end with duct tape. But I'm like, kids don't have that chance. And so if you can go do that with your kids, and I'd always tell you to go do it.
Very good. Well, that's outstanding. One thing that we ask everybody on this show, and we don't get too many issue. There aren't too many issue awards, so we don't get too many issue award winners. But we ask everybody, even the rest of us, what is, when you find yourself up on the mountain chasing those giant mule deer, what's one non-traditional item that you like to have with you at all times in your pack?
Non-traditional item.
Yeah, so it can't be like a knife we did let Steve Felix say his binoculars, but he had a very specific set of binoculars that he had to have with him.
Well,
and he was an Ishii award winner, so we let him do it.
I'm trying to think. There's something abnormal that I had to have. It was kind of more of a weird. One for sure is a wind indicator, right? Like if you ever go without a wind indicator, trying to throw dirt in the air, right? That just doesn't work the same as an indicator, like the wind indicator with just like chalk in the air so you can actually see. When I say that like bow hunting makes you a better hunter, I remember before they had the built-in rangefinder in the glass. And so for me, because I'm colorblind, some rangefinders just don't work for me because it's red.
Okay.
Right. And so if you ever, and it was funny, is remember having a rangefinder, so you're trying to range it and you have your binos and then you have your bow stuck between your legs. Right. That is a nightmare. Right. And it's getting, you're trying to put a stock on a buck, trying to do all those things. And so I remember the first time the rangefinder went in the binoculars, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Because now you can hold your bow, put your binos up. Well, then I was colorblind. So then I'd have to put my hand in front of the binos so I could see the black behind the red so I could actually see how far it was. So for me, I'm a Leica. True and true. I like the Leica glass for me because, the range works perfectly for people that are colorblind. So, but that's one for me that is an absolute must.
Okay. You want to change your life on the wind indicator? Use milkweed. You ever done that?
Yeah.
It's a life-changing thing, dude. When you use milkweed. How do
you don't have milkweed?
Well, you can buy it online. You can buy like gallon bags of it. Like people will just pick it and put it in bags for hunters.
Okay.
And you can like buy it for like $5 and then just keep it. And what's so cool about it is that dust that, it dissipates after 10 feet or whatever. But with that milkweed, and it'll show you thermals too. So like if you drop it, you can watch it all the way down to the next ridge, and like it's bright white. So you can see it floating down over the next crevice and how it, if it hits a tree line, how it responds when it gets there. It's really cool.
Dude, that is such a great idea. Milkweed.
Yeah, I go to my local dam every year and just pick a couple pods, and like 2 pods last year for 2 years because you just pull out a couple strands and drop it. It's really cool.
That's such a great idea.
Who was it? Man. Somebody said milkweed on the show. I don't remember.
Somebody did. I can't remember who that was. But if you pass it on to somebody, and then when he goes and shoots another world record, then we're gonna have to have him back on. Still. We're gonna ask that. We're gonna be like, Bowdy, did you use milkweed?
I'm for sure gonna use milkweed this year.
It's excellent, awesome, man.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, you'll have to go get another monster, and then we'll have you back on, and you can give us. It'll be like the milkweed report at the end of the season.
Should be a good year, right? We got good rain. If you're hunting a desert buck, it should be really good because you're not going to have the winter kill. They can get out of that nasty snow.
Yeah.
It stinks for like the Wyoming range, right? Man, the deer there, the northern Utah range is, man, my buddies at Snowmobile, so they just had animals dead all over the place. It was like the saddest thing. So.
Yeah, we actually did some feeding programs up in Utah just because they were looking at a 90-some% death rate on deer and elk. And it's like, you have to do something. You can't do enough, but it's just, it's just tragic. And when they go through the winter like that, and then the does are not in good condition, and then your recruitment the next year is low. So it takes a long time to bounce back from a winter like this. But like you said, in the areas that didn't have that massive snow cover in the die off, it should be, we had the moisture levels that you're hoping to see. So
Yeah,
hopefully
Nevada.
yeah.
Nevada, Arizona, right? If people were to ask me, like, where does the new like typical come from, right? I'd say it's going to come out of the desert again. It's just that, like, I think the desert hides, one of the things I'd tell you, that I think the desert hides age, right? Crazy story. What a buddy of mine, I didn't kill the buck, but Fish and Game had collared a buck, and I can't remember what year it was. I actually think it was 2000. No, it wasn't. I don't even give a year because I don't remember what it was. They'd collared a buck. We had a really severe drought, and I think it was 2016, but don't hold me to that one, because 2017 when I killed Casper was an incredible year across the board. They collar the buck, the deer, because when they collar every year, they'll go check the deer and check all the vitals, everything. The deer was 168 inches as a 7-year-old. So it wasn't like the deer wasn't mature. He was 7 years old, 168 inches. The next year we had really good rainfall. So the deer was 8 years old. The deer went 218 inches as a typical.
Crap.
Wow.
216 or 218 as a typical. And that's when you say it wasn't age, right? He was mature the year before.
Right.
Genetics didn't change. It was strictly the drought, right? And so I think if you're somebody said, hey, where's the new state record or world record going to come from? I'd always say the desert, because it allows deer to age. Because if you have a bad year, people are going to overlook a deer that's, deer looks like a ding. And what was crazy about that deer, I think they said he had like 16 inches of mass per side. When they killed him, he had like 22 per side.
Wow.
Jeez.
And so you just that's the feed in the fact of like weather. So
yeah,
you get a good year like this, it should be a really good year for, I would say, like the West. Anything that's got desert land touching it, the deer could get out. I think they're going to have a really, really good year. So
yeah. Now, if you had to pick, obviously mule deer is your thing. Is velvet your favorite, or do you like the hardhorn?
Velvet. And it's so crazy. At first, I'm like, man, how people kill these velvet deer? And then I'm like, man, how's anybody kill anything outside of a velvet deer? You got all different, like the color, right? I have like dark, like a darker black velvet to like a blonde velvet to the orange to like, got velvet that has like a big old white streak in the velvet, I mean, it has to be good velvet, right? Dried velvet that's like getting ready to come off, I killed a really big Colorado deer that went it was 255, had 3 droppers on him. Really, really cool buck. But yeah, my biggest regret there is I let the outfitter taught me out of hunting with a bow. So I'm so mad. Still today, I'm like, I knew better. We could have killed the deer. He just wasn't a bow hunter, and
right,
which was really sad. But understand, I'm like, you have a chance to hunt a deer like that, right? For me, it's more than that, and like how you kill them, right? Or if you have a chance to kill with a bow every time, go for it.
Yep. Yeah, that's I shot one this year, a mule deer in Eastern Oregon, and as he was sitting there, I shot him in his bed, and he was just beautiful, nice velvet buck. Hit him, he literally flopped over on his side, kicked about 3 times, and he was done right there. And it scraped the velvet off of the whole left side, and then by the time I got him down, it was the other side was pretty much gone. And I was like, man, it was so, like, I can still see in my mind when he's laying there on the hill, and there's just this perfect velvet buck. And then it takes a lot of special care to get him in the condition that
there's like a buddy running up and grabbing him before he dies. That's the care that it takes.
I don't have any buddies that fast.
No.
There's a guy out of Oregon that's doing like hair transplant for velvet deer. Gus. He did it on my Wyoming buck, and I have not had a chance to see it in person yet, but he finished it. My buddies that have seen it said it looks unbelievable.
Really cool.
So Yeah, which is cool because the artificial velvet doesn't look anything like the real velvet, but like I'm looking forward to seeing how that actually turned out. But yeah, I'm with you. Like, you see a buck and it's like, oh man, he's so perfect, and you shoot him, and then he's, took off the whole front beam, of the velvet. So
yeah, we actually had somebody send us a sample of I guess the fake velvet stuff on an antelope. And so it was actually up. We had a velvet antelope in the museum for a while, and people would go in there. Some people never caught it, and then other people are like, "Wait, that's just not right." And you're like, "Exactly, it's not." So
no, there's just one species of antelope that grow velvet. It's wild,
yeah, and this is the world record. So, well, hey, Bowdy, thanks for joining us, man. We sure appreciate it, and thanks for sharing your trophy with us at convention. What a magnificent animal, and just literally in a room full of giants, that one stood out and was just a magnificent specimen. So congratulations on that and some of your other trophies, and can't wait to see some more in the coming years.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. Have an awesome day and a great year.
Yeah, you too. Enjoy. Well, let's see. For Puerto Rico. I almost said Jamaica, and then I was like, Costa Rica,
Puerto Rico is all the same. Yeah.
It's like all I was thinking is sand and beaches, and that's
so. Well, you're ever this way, come visit. Dinner on me.
You got it. Will do.
Okay.
Take care.
See you guys.